Chapter 14. Rejuvenation through fasting. She was 60 years of age and had suffered for years with a minor heart ailment. I put her on a fast for 3 weeks. She rested in bed while the fast was in progress. At the end of her fast, she remarked, quote, "My heart feels so rested. It is so quiet I hardly know I have one in my body," unquote. This represented an improvement in the condition of the woman that was genuine and lasting. Overweight when she started, with high blood pressure, she lost 20 pounds and her blood pressure was greatly reduced, lifting a great burden from her heart. Her general feeling of vigor and well-being matched the improvement of her heart. Her former sleeplessness had given way to restful nightly repose. The improvement in her bowel action was as marked as that of her heart function. Certainly her improved youthfulness of appearance and the brightness of her eyes spoke volumes for the rejuvenating effects of her physiological rest. Anyone experienced with fasting has seen great numbers of such instances of physical rejuvenation achieved by means of the fast. The mental improvements commonly match the physical improvements. Occasional restoration of hearing in ears that have been deaf for years, improved vision, discarding glasses that have been worn for years, but rarely restoration of sight to the blind eyes, increased acuteness of the senses of taste and smell, restoration of the ability to sense delicate flavors, recovery of the sense of feeling in instances of sensory paralysis, stepped up vigor, increased mental powers, loss of weight, greatly increased functional vigor with better digestion and better bowel action, clear sparkling eyes, clearing of the complexion with a restoration of youthful bloom, the disappearance of some of the finer lines of the face, reduced blood pressure, better heart action, the reduction of enlarged prostate, sexual rejuvenation. These and many other evidences of rejuvenation are seen by everyone who has a wide experience with fasting. Fasting can bring about a virtual rebirth, a revitalization of the organism. As the fast progresses, all the cells of the body undergo refinement, and there is a removal from the protoplasm of the cells of stored foreign substances, metaplasmic materials, so that the cells become more youthful and function more efficiently. Some of these stored materials are highly toxic and have long remained in the fatty cells and in the cells of the connective tissues, which have been appropriately termed the, quote, dumping grounds of the body, unquote, to get them out of the circulation. Freeing the tissues of such materials renders the body more efficient as a physiologic mechanism. Besides the renovation that fasting enables the body to undergo, there is created potential for better function which continues long after the fast has been broken. Wear and waste with repair and replenishment are continuous and almost simultaneous processes in all living structures. The one is building up, the other a tearing down. The two processes have received the technical name of metabolism, as described above, and are called respectively anabolism, the building up, and catabolism, which is the tearing down. Catabolism predominates during periods of activity, anabolism during periods of rest and repose. Anabolism may be defined as the process by which the body is repaired, reinvigorated, and prepared for renewed activity. It is the dominant process during periods of active growth. It is somewhat slowed down in age. Fasting has been shown to result in an accelerated metabolism, with the emphasis, after the fast is broken, on the anabolic or constructive phase. This is to say, the general cleansing of the body renews the building up process of life. It is true that under experimental conditions, this improvement of the process of life is not lasting, but this has been due in great measure to the failure of the experimenters to follow up the fasts with anything other than a speedy return to conventional modes of living. A man's age is the duration of his life. When we use the term age to mean several aspects of that life, the stage of one's development, physiological age, the mental development attained, psychological age, or any other such term or phrase which signifies something other than chronological age, we are confusing age with body condition or with stages of growth and development. When we say that a man is old at 40 and that another man is young at 70, we actually refer to the physical and mental states of the two men and not to their ages. The suggestion that we use the phrase, quote, functional age, unquote, in speaking of an individual and make no reference to his birthday is based on the same confusion. It is true that birthdays do not tell the condition of one's body, nor do they tell how developed the mind may be, but conditions are related to age only incidentally and are not essential parts of age. A man of 70 may be youthful in physical condition or in mental outlook, or a man of 40 may be old in condition, flaccid, and depressed, but the first is still 70 years old and the other is only 40 years of age. Knowing these things, we may ignore the objection and offered that we are, quote, trying to set the clock back. The objection and often offered that we are, quote, trying to set the clock back, unquote. The changes called, quote, aging, unquote, that take place in the body are not related to so much to the clock of time as to causes totally unrelated to time as such. If the clock had causal relation to aging, we should expect the man of 70 to show all the signs of aging that are common to this time of life, and the man of 40 to present all the signs of, quote, youthfulness, unquote, that are common then. That we so frequently see these facts in reverse should cause us to question the assumption that the condition of the body is irrevocably related to the number of years we have lived. We should not find it difficult to understand that we age in time, but time is not the cause of the aging process. Think of the stone worn away by water. It changes in time, but time does not wear it away. The water wears it away. The process of wearing away the stone takes time. Time is not the wearing process. Two stones subjected to the same amount of water wearing will wear away at different rates depending on their respective hardness and density. For this same reason, two men under the same amount of impairing influences will age at different rates, depending on the resistance each offers to the causes of impairment. A stone will wear faster or slower depending on the amount of water that flows over it, wearing slowly if only a small amount of water washes its surface, wearing fast if more water flows over it. In the same way, a man will age slowly or rapidly depending on the amount of impairing influence to which he is subjected. Carrying our comparison a bit further, if we can conceive of a self-repairing rock being worn away and then having water cease flowing over it, we'd see the rock repair itself and restore much of its former substance, and will witness a process similar to that which takes place in the human organism, which is self-repair, when the causes of aging are removed. The body is capable of tearing down some of its damaged structures and replacing these with new structures. It is capable of renewing its cells, of casting off accumulated burdens, and of repairing much of its damages. Unlike the lifeless rock, the living organism is capable of taking an active hand in its affairs and doing something constructive. Man is constituted for longer and better life than he now enjoys. He should live many more years than he now does, and he should enjoy the possession of full health and vigor. He should not fall apart at 60 or earlier. The fact is that, barring death by accident or killing, as in war, human beings die of disease. If we live in such a manner as to prevent the evolution of disease, we not only may live much longer than is now thought possible, but we may live in full possession of all of our mental and physical powers. Aging has been defined as, quote, the accumulation of the body changes that increases one's chances of dying with the passage of time, unquote. This simply means that aging is the slow accumulation of pathological, diseased changes in the organs and tissues of the body. It signifies the accumulation of damages to the structures of the body and a slow impairment of the functions of life. Old age is simply one more chronic disease. This is the reason we may age early or late, and why some men are younger at 70 than others are at 40. Age takes place in time, but is not caused by time. It is not important, therefore, that means be found of determining accurately one's physiological age. What is important is that we find and recognize the causes of the aging process. Remove the cause of aging, and physiological age takes care of itself. It is claimed that no one knows precisely what the body changes that constitute of aging consist of, or what exactly the changes might be. The experiments of the noted French scientist Dr. Alexis Carrel, author of Man, the Unknown, and keeping fragments of a chicken heart alive for many years, revealed that they aged when not kept free of their own cell waste. In other words, they aged as a consequence of the accumulation in the culture medium in which they were kept of their own metabolic waste. And these wastes, if these wastes were regularly washed away so that the cells were not poisoned by them, the chicken heart did not age. We have indications again that aging is a result of chronic toxic saturation. This important finding has received all too little attention, perhaps because there was no way to exploit it. Carrel's experiments, and many more like them, have led to the conclusion by some authorities that cells are potentially immortal. Normally, they continue to divide and redivide, but they do not die. From this viewpoint, death would seem to be abnormal. What we observe, however, under all ordinary conditions of life, is that cells do age and they do die in great numbers. To go on living indefinitely, all conditions must be favorable. If the cells are potentially ageless, as it is now believed by scientists, and the complex body ages, then it is evident that one of two things is true. Either the functional specialization of cell groups, the organs of the body, is inadequate, or there is some lack of coordination of the cell groups in the body. Perhaps there may be both. If one or both of the propositions is true, the question becomes, is the adequacy of specialization or the inadequacy of coordination a primary state of life, or is it a result of ascertainable and removable causes? If it is primary, we cannot hope to prevent, for more than a brief span, the aging process, which seems to set in most cases, rather early in life. If it is due to avoidable and removable causes, as seems likely, we should be able to do much to prevent aging. At least in many of the lower forms of life, numerous experiments have demonstrated that not only can the aging process be indefinitely held off, but also that it can be reversed and youthfulness restored. For more than 15 years, Professor C.M. Child of the University of Chicago did research on aging in animals. His results revealed that periodic fasting is generally conducive to rejuvenescence. In certain species of insects, he found that with abundant food, insects pass through their whole life history in 3 or 4 weeks, but when the food is greatly reduced or the insects are forced to fast, they may continue active and young for at least 3 years. His conclusion was that, quote, partial starvation, fasting, inhibits senescence. The starveling is brought back to form and advanced age to the beginning of post-embryonic life. It is almost reborn, unquote. Child pointed out that in the organic world generally, rejuvenescence is but the regular or ordinary process of cell renewal that is in continuous operation throughout the life of every organism. The failure to maintain youthfulness is due to causes that prevent the ideal operation of the regular renewal process. Any removal of these hindering causes at any age results in a movement in the direction of renewed youthfulness. Professor Child's experiments led Anton J. Carlson, professor of physiology in the same university, to experiment for years with both fasting and feeding in an effort to determine how much rejuvenation could be brought about in man by the same means that result in rejuvenation of lower forms of life. He was convinced that he found evidence of the rejuvenating effects of fasting in man. Unfortunately, his experiments with human subjects were all too few, and most of them were performed on more or less youthful subjects. Frederick Holzel, who did much of the fasting that Professor Carlson observed, thinks that the possibilities of rejuvenescence progressively decrease as age advances, and that little rejuvenation may be expected after age of 35. On this, I am compelled to take issue with him. I think that his observations in this field have been too narrowly limited to justify setting any such arbitrary limit to the possibilities of human rejuvenation. 35 is not a fixed landmark in human life. It is not an age in which irreversible changes have been made in human tissues. It must be recognized that there exist sharply defined limits to the possibilities of human rejuvenation. There are irreversible changes in the tissues of man's body, and trying to undo them is like attempting to grow a new leg after one has been lost. In many of the lower forms of animal life, some of them very complex animals, the ability to grow new members or internal organs, even new heads, brains, and eyes, is possible. And the possibilities of rejuvenation are much greater in such organisms than in higher forms. But a greater deal of rejuvenation is possible in man than we have heretofore thought. We may accept as true the claim that the greater the amount and extent of pathological changes that have taken place in the body of man, the less are his possibilities of rejuvenation. We may agree with Holzel that the older one grows, the less are his possibilities of renewing youthfulness. Yet, some of the most remarkable examples of rejuvenation I have witnessed have been in men and women past 60. Without the least desire to discount the value of the work done by laboratory experimenters with fasting, I think that I am justified in saying that these observations have been too narrowly restricted to enable the laboratory workers to give us the final word. Yet, I do not think the greatest possibilities of the fast are in the rejuvenation of old men and women. Its possibility for reversing the process of senescence in younger men and women so that the aging process is slowed down represents an equally important role. If we can employ fasting to prevent damaging changes in vital organs by periodically freeing the body of its toxic load and by giving the organs of life much needed rest, we should be able to accomplish far more lasting good in preventing aging than in seeking rejuvenation of the aged. Some investigators stress the evanescent character of the rejuvenating effects of fasting and have taken the position that they are not worth the effort required to bring them about. To this objection, there are two important replies. First, a temporary regeneration is all that is needed to remove many structural defects and to improve the functioning of efficiency of the organism. The removal of the toxic load is not evanescent, and this is vitally important to the future of the organism. Second, in making their investigation, as already noted, these research men have guaranteed the evanescent character of the gains made by the readiness with which they have returned the subjects of the experiments to their prior toxogenic ways of life. In 1960, Tara Singh of India underwent a 48-day fast for political reasons. He was 76 years of age, and his physicians gave it as their belief, after examining him, that his period of abstinence had, quote, increased his lifespan by at least 10 years, unquote. This statement of physicians, issued from New Delhi, added that the fasting period had, quote, relieved illness from which he was suffering, unquote. While the improvement of health of Singh was a byproduct of his fast, it is both interesting and significant to find that his physicians are candid enough to give credit to the period of abstinence for his benefits of his health. It is usual for physicians to discredit all reports of benefits resulting from fasting. Perhaps this incident represents a turning point in their attitude. We hope that physicians will soon come to recognize in fasting a natural means of rejuvenation that is actually superior to gland grafts, the masqueraded or organs of unborn lambs, and the use generally of animal and insect products, which so far have provided no genuine rejuvenation. Perhaps this change in attitude can lead to a recognition of the fact that whatever rejuvenation an organism is capable of effecting is the product of the operation of intrinsic forces and processes under favorable conditions, and not a forced state resulting from exotic impositions. Recovery of health, this is to say, clearing up of pathological states, and rejuvenation may yet be seen to be one and the same process. Brown-Séquard's seminal fluid rejuvenator, Steinach's subcutaneous division of the vas deferens, the duct or tube carrying the secretion of the testes, supposed to result in rejuvenation, Voronoff's monkey gland transplantation, Brinkley's goat gland transplantation, Funk's vitamin rejuvenation plan, all having failed, perhaps we can turn our attention to a more rational approach to the problems created by aging. If we can see in fasting a means of enabling the body to free itself not alone of its accumulated toxic load, but also of its burden of accumulated abnormal changes in its tissues, we can use this means of rejuvenation to great advantage. Recognizing its limitations and not expecting the impossible, we may still find in the fast an avenue perhaps not to eternal youth, but to a protracted youth that endures long into what we once considered old age.